The intelligence is artificial, but the crime is real. Welcome to AI True Crime, where we unravel the stories that linger at the crossroads of human ambition, manipulation, and the search for meaning. Tonight, we venture into the shadowy and deeply unsettling world of Nxivm, a self-help organization that promised enlightenment and empowerment but concealed a chilling reality. Behind the polished seminars and lofty rhetoric was a network of manipulation and abuse, masterminded by a man whose charisma and cunning ensnared countless followers. Nxivm began with a seductive premise. It offered personal and professional development, a path to conquer your fears and unlock untapped potential. At its center was Keith Raniere, a man revered within the organization as Vanguard. He was heralded as one of the world's smartest men, a philosopher with the answers to life's most complex questions. Raniere presented himself as a mentor, a guide to those seeking meaning, but beneath the surface lay a calculated predator who used his influence to control and exploit. Raniere did not work alone. Nancy Salzman, known as Prefect, co-founded Nxivm alongside him. A trained nurse and hypnotist, Salzman was instrumental in crafting the group's teachings and reinforcing Raniere's grip on his followers. Together, they created a system that blurred the lines between self-improvement and indoctrination, leaving members vulnerable to deeper manipulation. Among Nxivm's most visible adherents was Alison Mack, a television actress whose fame lent credibility to the organization. Mack became one of Raniere's most loyal recruiters and played a pivotal role in DOS, a clandestine inner circle where the group's darkest abuses occurred. DOS operated under the guise of a women's empowerment group but demanded unwavering loyalty and submission, with Mack serving as both enforcer and victim. The lifeblood of Nxivm came not just from its followers but from the immense wealth of Claire and Sarah Bronfman. Heiresses to the Seagram's liquor fortune, the Bronfman sisters bankrolled the organization, shielding it from scrutiny and financing relentless legal campaigns against its critics. Their financial power allowed Raniere's web of control to stretch further than anyone could have imagined. Not all who entered Nxivm remained trapped. India Oxenberg, the daughter of actress Catherine Oxenberg, became one of its most notable survivors. India's eventual escape and testimony would play a crucial role in bringing the organization's inner workings to light. Her story, along with those of other defectors, revealed the profound psychological and physical toll of life within Nxivm. The group's unraveling came, in part, from those who once believed in its mission. Mark Vicente, a filmmaker drawn to Nxivm's promise of personal transformation, became one of its fiercest whistleblowers. Disillusioned by what he witnessed, Vicente's testimony and documentation of Nxivm's activities proved pivotal in exposing the truth. Tonight, we unravel the rise and fall of Nxivm, from its seductive beginnings to its shocking demise. We'll explore how this organization preyed on the hopes and vulnerabilities of its followers, the tools of manipulation it wielded, and the ultimate reckoning that brought its leaders to justice. This is the story of Nxivm, a labyrinthine tale of ambition, deception, and the relentless quest for power. Let's begin. Keith Raniere was a man of contradictions, someone whose seemingly humble demeanor masked an unrelenting hunger for power. Before Nxivm became synonymous with scandal, it began as the Executive Success Programs, or ESP, in 1998. Raniere had long been obsessed with the idea of human potential and was eager to position himself as the ultimate authority on personal transformation. He claimed to have unparalleled intellectual prowess, citing a childhood IQ test that purportedly placed him among the world's greatest minds. This mythology became the foundation of his allure, a man so intelligent, he could rewire your thinking and reshape your life. Raniere's reputation didn't spring from thin air. Before founding ESP, he had co-created a multi-level marketing company called Consumers Byline. Promising its members financial independence through a system of direct sales, the company ultimately collapsed under allegations of being a pyramid scheme. Raniere settled with authorities in the mid-1990s without admitting wrongdoing, but the experience did little to dissuade him from pursuing his ambitions. Instead, he rebranded himself, combining his salesmanship with a veneer of self-help spirituality, and found a willing partner in Nancy Salzman. Salzman, a nurse trained in neuro-linguistic programming, brought a level of legitimacy and polish to Ranier's vision. Together, they crafted a curriculum designed to attract high achievers, people who were ambitious, intelligent, and, crucially, seeking something more from life. Executive success programs offered workshops that promised to teach participants how to overcome emotional blocks, communicate effectively, and achieve unparalleled success. The courses were intense and often expensive, with participants encouraged to commit fully to the process. ESP quickly gained traction, particularly among those drawn to its promise of unlocking human potential. Raniere and Salzman understood the importance of creating an aura of exclusivity, and they marketed the program as a cutting-edge tool for elite thinkers. This exclusivity was reinforced by the language of the courses, with terms like rational inquiry and integration giving the impression of a scientific approach. Participants were often told that Raniere's teachings were revolutionary, that his insights had the power to change not only their lives but the world. The program's appeal wasn't just intellectual, it was deeply emotional. Participants were encouraged to share their vulnerabilities in exercises designed to strip away their defenses. While these sessions were framed as therapeutic breakthroughs, they also served another purpose, binding participants to the group. The more people revealed, the more invested they became, and the harder it was to walk away. It wasn't long before ESP became a magnet for the ambitious and influential. Its early adopters included entrepreneurs, artists, and even celebrities, many of whom saw the program as a path to greater fulfillment. Among them were individuals like actress Alison Mack and the Bronfman sisters, whose connections and resources would prove instrumental in the group's growth. The Bronfmans' wealth enabled Raniere to expand his reach, funding not only lavish events but also aggressive legal campaigns against critics. As ESP evolved into Nxivm, it retained the trappings of a self-help movement, but its true purpose began to reveal itself. Raniere wasn't simply offering a path to success, he was building a system of control, a hierarchy where loyalty to him was paramount. Behind the promises of empowerment lay a darker reality, one that would ultimately expose the cracks in Nxivm's foundation. But in those early years, few questioned Raniere's motives. To his followers, he was a visionary, a man whose teachings were not just life-changing but essential. They believed in his mission, and in doing so, they became part of a carefully constructed machine, one designed to serve only him. As Nxivm grew from its foundations in the executive success programs, it began to evolve into something far more insidious. What had started as a series of self-improvement workshops morphed into a tightly controlled organization with a clear hierarchy and an increasingly cult-like devotion to Keith Raniere. The shift was subtle at first, hidden behind the language of personal empowerment and success. But for those who stepped deeper into Raniere's world, the promises of transformation came at a steep cost. Raniere understood the importance of community in building loyalty, and Nxivm created a strong sense of belonging. Followers were encouraged to adopt the language and ideology of the group, referring to themselves as seekers on a journey toward enlightenment. Weekly gatherings, known as intensives, reinforced the teachings and gave members the opportunity to connect with others who shared their commitment to growth. Raniere himself was positioned as the ultimate authority, a man whose intellect and moral clarity placed him far above the average person. Followers revered him, often describing him in glowing, almost mythic terms. Central to Nxivm's philosophy was the idea that individuals were weighed down by irrational fears and negative conditioning, which Raniere claimed his teachings could eradicate. These limiting beliefs, as they were called, were seen as the primary obstacles to success and fulfillment. Through a process of deconstruction, participants were encouraged to confront their deepest insecurities and emotional pain. But this process often left them vulnerable, breaking down their defenses in a way that made them more susceptible to manipulation. The methods used in Nxivm were carefully designed to create dependence. Participants were assigned to coaches who monitored their progress and provided guidance, but also reported any signs of dissent. Achievements within the organization were marked by colored sashes, symbolizing the individual's rank and commitment. The system rewarded obedience and punished skepticism, subtly conditioning members to prioritize the group's needs over their own. For many, the sense of purpose and connection Nxivm offered was intoxicating. This was particularly true for those who had achieved success in their professional lives but felt unfulfilled. Alison Mack, for example, spoke publicly about how Nxivm had given her a sense of direction and meaning. Her celebrity status made her one of the group's most visible members, and she became a fervent recruiter, using her platform to bring others into the fold. The Bronfman sisters, Claire and Sarah, played an equally critical role in Nxivm's expansion. As heirs to the Seagram's liquor fortune, they provided the financial muscle that allowed Raniere to scale his operations. Their wealth funded lavish retreats, sprawling properties, and a legal war chest used to intimidate critics and former members. The sisters believed deeply in Raniere's vision, seeing him as a mentor and spiritual guide who could help them achieve their highest potential. But beneath the surface, there were already signs of something far darker. Raniere's teachings increasingly emphasized the idea of self-sacrifice in the pursuit of growth. Members were encouraged to push past their discomfort, even if it meant enduring emotional pain or humiliation. This ethos laid the groundwork for DOS, a secretive inner circle that would eventually expose the true nature of Nxivm. By the mid-2000s, Nxivm had grown into an international organization, with branches in Canada, Mexico, and Europe. Its members included prominent figures from the worlds of business, entertainment, and politics. Yet for all its success, the organization remained shrouded in secrecy. The deeper one went into Nxivm, the more opaque its practices became. Raniere had carefully constructed a system that demanded absolute loyalty while isolating members from outside influence. The seeds of Nxivm's eventual downfall were already being sown, even as Raniere's grip on his followers tightened. For now, however, the group thrived, its promises of empowerment masking the layers of coercion and control that lay beneath. As Nxivm expanded and its influence grew, Keith Raniere began to tighten his grip on the organization. Behind the layers of seminars, workshops, and self-help jargon, Raniere had something far more sinister in mind: a secret society within Nxivm that would serve as his ultimate instrument of control. By 2015, this inner circle had taken shape. Known as DOS, an acronym for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, loosely translated to Master over Slave Women, it would reveal the darkest depths of Raniere's manipulations. DOS was presented to its members as a women's empowerment group, a way to foster strength and accountability through mentorship. What was not immediately clear to new recruits was that this mentorship operated within a rigid hierarchy, with Keith Raniere at the top as the ultimate master. Beneath him were layers of slaves and masters, creating a structure that demanded absolute loyalty and submission at every level. Women who joined DOS were often recruited by other women they trusted, people like Alison Mack, who had fully embraced her role as one of Raniere's most devoted lieutenants. Recruits were told that joining DOS would unlock their full potential, helping them overcome personal limitations and achieve greatness. To prove their commitment, they were asked to provide collateral, a euphemism for damaging material such as explicit photographs, confessions of deeply personal secrets, or incriminating financial information. This collateral would later be used to ensure their silence and compliance. Once inside, the reality of DOS became clear. Members were subjected to a strict regimen of control, including restricted diets, mandatory check-ins, and tasks designed to test their obedience. Raniere often dictated these tasks himself, though his involvement was carefully concealed from those lower in the hierarchy. The ultimate proof of loyalty came in the form of a branding ritual, during which recruits were physically marked with a symbol that, unbeknownst to many, included Raniere's initials. This branding was presented as a badge of honor, a permanent reminder of their commitment to the group. For many women, the psychological toll of DOS was immense. They were trapped in a system that exploited their vulnerabilities and used their own collateral to keep them in line. Raniere manipulated their fears and insecurities, presenting himself as the only person who could help them overcome their struggles. Yet, even as he claimed to empower these women, he was systematically stripping away their autonomy. The existence of DOS was kept secret from most Nxivm members, but rumors began to circulate. Former members who had left Nxivm spoke of coercive practices and emotional abuse, and some began to question the true nature of the organization. Mark Vicente, once a loyal follower, started to piece together the darker side of Nxivm and eventually became a vocal critic. Alongside other defectors like Sarah Edmondson, he began to expose the inner workings of DOS, providing evidence of the branding rituals and Ranier's direct involvement. The turning point came in 2017, when the New York Times published an explosive exposé detailing the abuses within DOS. The article, which included first-hand accounts from former members, sparked a firestorm of media coverage and drew the attention of law enforcement. For the first time, the full extent of Nxivm's practices was laid bare, and the carefully constructed facade of a self-help organization began to crumble. As authorities closed in, the once loyal inner circle of Nxivm began to fracture. Ranier, who had always maintained an air of invincibility, fled to Mexico in an attempt to evade capture. But his time on the run was short-lived. In 2018, he was arrested and extradited to the United States, where he would face charges ranging from racketeering to sex trafficking. The exposure of DOS was a pivotal moment in the unraveling of Nxivm. It revealed not only the depths of Ranier's depravity but also the resilience of those who had escaped his grasp. The bravery of survivors like Sarah Edmondson and India Oxenberg, who came forward despite the risks, was instrumental in bringing the truth to light. But even as Ranier faced justice, the scars left by Nxivm remained. For many former members, the road to recovery would be long and difficult, marked by the lingering effects of manipulation and betrayal. Yet their stories served as a powerful reminder of the strength it takes to confront the darkest of truths and fight for freedom. Keith Ranier's arrest in March 2018 marked the beginning of the end for Nxivm. Captured in Mexico after a brief time on the run, Ranier was extradited to the United States to face a litany of charges. The crimes laid out against him were staggering: sex trafficking, forced labor, wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. At the heart of the charges was the discovery of DOS, the secretive group that had turned Nxivm into a front for Ranier's exploitation and abuse. The trial, which began in May 2019, was nothing short of explosive. Prosecutors laid bare the inner workings of Nxivm, painting a damning portrait of a man who had weaponized charisma, psychological manipulation, and the vulnerabilities of his followers to create a system of total control. Witness after witness took the stand, many of them former members who recounted harrowing tales of coercion, degradation, and betrayal. One of the trial's most shocking revelations was the extent to which Ranier's followers had been manipulated into surrendering their autonomy. Former members of DOS testified about the branding rituals, the collection of collateral, and the punishing restrictions placed on their lives. They spoke of how Ranier had used their deepest insecurities against them, positioning himself as the only one who could fix them while systematically breaking them down. The prosecution presented a trove of evidence, including explicit messages from Ranier to members of DOS, in which he outlined the rules they were to follow. These messages left no doubt about his role as the mastermind behind the group's abuses. Additional testimony revealed the extent of Nxivm's financial crimes, including the Bronfman sisters' efforts to funnel money into the organization and fund relentless legal attacks against detractors. The defense, meanwhile, struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. Ranier's attorneys argued that his relationships with members were consensual and that Nxivm's practices were misunderstood. They attempted to frame him as a misunderstood genius, a man whose unconventional methods were misrepresented by a vindictive media. But the jury was unmoved. After weeks of testimony, they deliberated for just 5 hours before delivering their verdict, guilty on all counts. Ranier's conviction was a watershed moment, but it was far from the end of the story. In October 2020, he was sentenced to 120 years in prison, ensuring that he would never again walk free. During the sentencing, survivors of Nxivm confronted Ranier, sharing powerful and emotional accounts of the harm he had caused. Despite their testimonies, Ranier refused to accept responsibility, maintaining his innocence and declaring that he had been misunderstood. The fallout from Nxivm's collapse rippled far beyond Raniere. Nancy Salzman, Alison Mack, and Claire Bronfman were among the high-ranking members who faced charges for their roles in the organization. Salzman, who had co-founded Nxivm and played a pivotal role in shaping its curriculum, pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy and was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Mack, who had become one of the most public faces of DOS, pleaded guilty to racketeering charges and received a 3-year sentence. Claire Bronfman, whose wealth had sustained Nxivm for years, was sentenced to nearly 7 years in prison for her involvement. As the legal cases unfolded, survivors of Nxivm worked to rebuild their lives. Many shared their stories publicly, determined to shine a light on the group's tactics and help others avoid similar traps. Documentaries like The Vow and Seduced, Inside the Nxivm Cult brought these stories to a wider audience, sparking conversations about the nature of coercion and the red flags of cult-like organizations. Yet for all the justice that was served, the scars left by Nxivm remained. Survivors spoke of the long road to recovery, of the lingering trauma and the challenge of reclaiming their identities. The story of Nxivm was a reminder of how easily ambition and idealism can be twisted into tools of control, and of the resilience it takes to fight back. Tonight, we've explored the rise and fall of Nxivm, a story that began with the promise of empowerment and ended in betrayal. It's a cautionary tale, one that shows the dangers of unchecked power and the human cost of manipulation. But it's also a story of courage, of those who refused to remain silent, even when the odds were against them. In our next episode, we'll turn our attention to another controversial figure in the world of self-proclaimed enlightenment, Teal Swan. Often described as a spiritual guru and a polarizing leader, Teal Swan's teachings and practices have sparked both devotion and widespread criticism. Join us as we explore her rise to prominence, the controversies surrounding her, and the lives touched by her influence. Until then, this has been AI True Crime, where the intelligence is artificial, but the crimes are real.